Hello and welcome to the Transformation Project, a podcast and community for women who are looking to transform into the best version of themselves no matter where they are at. A place where you can listen, learn, and laugh along with us as we dive deep into different topics to help you live a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. Remember, we are all learning here together, and therefore the content and opinions of the hosts and our guests should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Transformation Project. This is one of those episodes where you're going to want to get a notepad out. I saw our guest on TikTok, which I'm becoming slightly obsessed with. Used in the right way, TikTok is great. And the message that she was giving resonated with me so much, being a woman who was born and raised in South Africa. The things that Rachel was talking about really resonated with me. So I'm going to introduce her. Rachel Cox is an accomplished TikTok influencer. She's passionate about women's empowerment and safety. She provides valuable advice on self-defense and safety to women through her social media platform, which was how I connected with her. She's been a nonprofit executive leader and CEO for over 17 years and holds degrees in communication, human resource management, and art. In addition to her professional achievements, Rachel's also an author, photographer, and former candidate for House of Representatives in Arkansas. She's been a foster parent for 6 years and adopted 4 teens, making her a mom of 7 and a grandma of 8. Her passion for empowering families, women, and youth has been the driving force behind all her endeavors. As the Executive Director of Dress for Success Northwest Arkansas, Rachel brings her expertise in community building and women's empowerment to support women in making positive, lasting changes in their lives. Welcome on, Rachel.
Wow, thank you so much. Yes, I'm so glad to be here from the States. So I know that those who listen are from all over the world, but it's exciting to be able to connect. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, the magic of the internet is wonderful. It's early morning here in Australia, and obviously late night for you in the States. So we're super grateful for you for coming on at this time of night. So as I say, I'm from South Africa. A lot of the things that you talk about are things that I grew up with as general knowledge, and that I still practice today in Australia, which is generally traditionally has been a safer environment, but we're moving towards it not being. And I'm always amazed at the things that I have simply as habit that people here would never think about. And so that's when you were talking about things, I was like, this is amazing. We need to share this. So can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you became passionate about women's safety and self-defense?
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's so good to be on here with both of you. And yes, I think it's critical that women know this information, but also that parents at large know this information, both to be protective of themselves, but also their kids. And so I started years ago as a very young mom myself. I ended up having my son at 18 unexpectedly, but it gave me a hyper awareness for not only feeling like I needed to take care of myself, but now I was responsible for this other human being. And I think even before that, when I was just a young girl, the amount of, in the States anyway, the amount of kidnappings and missing children and women who were victims of some form of assault just kept rising. And as technology improved, we saw that this had been happening for decades. This isn't necessarily new. It's just that now we know more about it because we're more connected. And there are ways that, when I was growing up in the States, I don't know if it was like this in Australia or South Africa, but we had what we called the milk carton kids. And so these were pictures of children that had gone missing, and they would put them on our school milk cartons so that if you saw these children, you were to report it, because there was no TikTok or social media or podcast back then. So I think even as a young child, it got really ingrained into me that, okay, this could be scary. And I was part of the generation that was considered the latchkey kids. I'm the last of the Gen X, the beginning of the millennial. I find myself kind of in that middle ground between. And so when I was a young girl, there was not as many rules. I mean, we were told to stay outside until it got dark. And then if somebody went missing or was kidnapped, then it may end up on a milk carton, but you most likely would never hear about it again. And so for me, when I did become a parent at 18, I really felt that I am going to make sure that my child gets better than what I had and that the generation that I was raised in had. And so I started taking self-defense courses. I started making sure that I was more educated on the topic. And this really resulted a couple years prior to that, as I was a victim myself of a sexual assault. And that was really tough. And it's not something that I even talked about for several years. It took me lots of counseling and therapies and different things. But if it could happen to me, I knew it could happen to anyone because I was smart. I was educated. I had a good support system. I should have known, right? But I didn't know. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know the warning signs, what to look for. So I spent the better part of my early adulthood really educating myself, making sure that I healed from the experience that I had had. And then when I became 21, I became an executive director at a nonprofit that was about empowering youth and women. And so that's really where it all started. But yes, I could talk forever about this, and I know we'll have more questions, but yes, that's really where it all started for me.
Wow, this is so awesome. So I have just a little bit of background. So, Rachel, I have a 4-year-old daughter. And to be honest, these thoughts never really crossed my mind. I wasn't like you. I didn't think about these things growing up. I worked in Surfers Paradise here in Australia, running a bar, and I would walk home from the bar every weekend at 2 a.m. and lots of people would be like, Jessica, that is not safe. My mother was never happy with me. And I was like, it's all good. It's all good. Like, I know how to take care of myself. I can, I'm very fit. I can run really fast. I'll carry my keys in my pocket. I won't have my headphones in. But that was really me. That I thought I was sweet. And very, very luckily, I have never really had anything happen. Now having a 4-year-old daughter, it's all I think about. All I think about, her going to daycare. What if something happened at daycare? What if something happened there? What, she's now at the age where I leave her for dance. Like she goes into the dance room and does her little ballet and stuff. And I can't, there's no glass. Like I can't see through. And it's, stressful. It's all I think about. So I am so, so grateful that you have come on to this and we're going to share this with everybody. And I'm just, thank you. I'm so grateful. I'm so excited to learn everything. I want to start with the self-defense. You said you've taken self-defense courses. Like what does that look like?
So I would say the first thing that every individual on earth needs to know is that self-awareness is the greatest self-defense, right? And just having self-awareness and social awareness. So I think one of the things, and to your point, no one ever thinks they're going to be a victim of self-defense, or at least I hope they don't. I didn't, or excuse me, of assault or of, a crime, or to be a victim of a predator. But then it happens. And then there's this weird guilt thinking, should I have known more? Like, how could I prepare myself better? And so a lot of it comes back to education. So the self-defense courses that I started taking at a young age really helped me to identify that social awareness piece of knowing that especially when you're entering and exiting different places, whether it's your home, your place of business, the grocery store, you need to not be on your phone, not be texting, not be, fidgeting with your purse or looking for your keys. You need to be very aware of your environment. And I think that situational social awareness is something that a lot of people, especially in the day of technology, have sometimes lost. I still almost every day that I go to a, supermarket, grocery store or something, I see people walking in and they're just texting or they're Snapchatting or on TikTok, or they have their phone to their ear and they're doing a million things, not paying attention to the cars that are around them, not paying attention to the fact that there might be someone in a truck across the way watching them. It's terrifying. And so I think to begin is we have to be able to make sure to have social awareness when we're entering and exiting places, but also that intuition. There are times I think in all of our lives where we start thinking, am I over worrying about this? Like, am I the only one that thinks this? If you have that feeling, it's valid. It's a valid feeling. And people need to really not, count themselves out or think I'm just being, over worried or over concerned. This is just my anxiety. If you have that feeling, it's because there's something inside of you telling you this is not right. And it may not be that, you're going to be attacked or your life's in danger, but it may be that your intuition is telling you that there's something about this situation that's not adding up. We need to gut check ourselves. And when we have those things happen, we need to be okay with saying, I don't feel comfortable. Another thing I see a lot with women is that sometimes we're just too nice. So I think, we want to be polite. We don't want to come across as being harsh or cold. So sometimes we allow things even things that are not necessarily to a point of attack or predatory, but things to happen that we don't really feel okay with, but we don't want to come across as, that person that doesn't care or, non-empathetic. And what I mean by that is when I go to New York City quite often, and I can always tell, and I'm not from there, but I travel there, I can always tell who the people are who are not from New York, because there are a lot of homeless unhoused people on the streets. There are a lot of people on the streets that are trying to, swindle you by trying to get you to come over so they can try to sell you things. And the people that live there know you just don't engage. Like, you need to be aware that they're there. But those who are trying to be so nice, they're like, no, thank you, or not today. And that's all they need. They just need that little bit of, okay, this person doesn't seem strong. And it's sad because usually politeness sometimes gets confused for weakness. And so it's sad that we have to be in a world where we always have to be on guard and assertive, but it might save your life. These are things that we really need to be aware of. In other self-defense techniques, I can kind of tell you a couple here in a little bit. If you want, I can show you some real easy ones, but I would say that's where I would start.
Yeah.
I think sorry, Jessica.
I was just you brought me back to working in hospitality, because there's been so many times as a waitress and a bartender,
right,
that typically men will hit on you or go to touch you or something like that. And you don't, especially working for tips. So I'm Canadian. So like North Americans, we work for tips, not so much here in Australia, but you do want to be polite, because you're like, well, like, I'm going to get a better tip. And I, I just want to be nice. But yeah, but as I've gotten older, I've definitely gotten a bit more like, no, just not appropriate. And I see it with becoming a manager. I saw it so much with the girls that we used to work with. And so many times I've had to step in and be like, not appropriate. You can leave. Oh, and then anyways, they're always up in arms, and it's like, no, you can leave. So it just, yeah, that really hit home. One of the other things my husband and I have been speaking about recently is we're looking to put our daughter in jiu-jitsu. So that's why I asked, what are those self-defense like? Would you recommend something like that?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no wrong answer when it comes to opportunities for martial arts, jiu-jitsu, things of that nature that will get some more awareness of just some basic technique. But I think one of the things that we have to start with too as parents is age appropriate, but having the conversations, having the hard conversations. And one of the conversations that I've had to have with all of my kids is that about consent. What is okay? What is not okay? This is your body. Nobody's allowed to touch your body, especially in these ways. And if it's a parent, a coach, a sibling, a teacher, a stranger, someone you don't know, makes you uncomfortable, use your big girl or big boy voice, right? And make that eye contact, say that, and that I will always believe you, no matter what. No matter if someone tells you that you'll get in trouble or they'll hurt your family or no one will believe you, or that, well, you wanted me to do this. No. Like, I will always believe you. And I think even though those conversations are really uncomfortable to have, and sometimes we think, oh my gosh, my kid's only 3 years old or 4 years old, I really don't want to bring this up at this age. We have to have them. But we can do it in a way that's not terrifying, but in a way that says, these are your private parts, and give those private parts the actual name, like actually give them the real names. And say, no one is allowed to touch your private parts, and I think those kind of things are really important too. But I think, yes, jujitsu, self-defense courses, and teaching them eye contact, to use their voice, and we'll go over some of those self-defense things too that I think all ages could use.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me because I have two daughters. One is 22 and
Yes.
she is a paramedic and works for a private paramedic company. And so they do a lot of festivals, a lot of big music festivals, a lot of concerts and stuff like that. And even though she's been raised in my house and is in general a pretty formidable person for a small person, she's not a big person. There was a lot of times in the beginning where, because she's a woman paramedic in a female uniform and she's cute, they hit on her all the time. Men and women hit on her all the time. And she's there not only as a paramedic, but also as an employee of the company. And they have a client, which is who they're working for. And so that balance between what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, where do I put my authoritative voice on and say, you need to back up right now. And all of that was a bit of a lesson for her, kind of moving forward. And I'm really proud of her that she's kind of sort of stepped into that, and she knows, when to put that voice on and when to be, that it's okay. They're not going to get into trouble with the client because she's protected her own self. And then my other daughter is 13. And it's really interesting that we're having this interview today because last night her and her friends went to their very first music festival. And so it's a 13 to 17-year-old music festival. So you have to be younger than 17 to get in and you have to be older than 13. But it's the first time they've been allowed to be at anything like that. And because it's me, I took all of them. They had their snap maps shared with me. They had to check in every hour with a photo. My daughter had an AirTag in her pocket. I was parked directly outside the gate and I did not leave. And a lot of parents would be like, that's bizarre. Because I see all the parents just dropping their kids and off they go. I did not leave. I stayed there for like 8 hours. Felt like forever. And it was a really interesting way for us to have that conversation about all those basic security and safety things that as women, and even as there were some boys with them, we have to be aware of. You have to stay together. Do not go to the bathroom by yourself. Even if one of you goes to the bathroom and you all go back and then someone goes, oh, I need to go to the bathroom now, you all go again. Do not take anything from anybody, even if it's a sticker, even if it's a permanent tattoo, like all these different conversations that felt stressful a little bit for me having with them. But I'm hoping it's going to stand them in good stead, because these are the things that even as a woman now, if I had to go somewhere like that, where there's a lot of people, they're the same things. My daughter, when she goes out, they're the same things that they have to kind of think of. And so what would you say are those things that as woman or young woman, when you're out and you're about, like you need to pay attention to, keep in the back of your mind those rules that you have to stick to keep yourself safe as much as possible?
Yeah, I think you hit on some really great points. And so, one of the things that you talked about is strength in numbers. And I think, whether it's a teenager or a young woman or, a woman my age, being able to make sure that someone knows where you're supposed to be. And if you have a device or wearables that have a sharing option, you should do that with a trusted loved one or someone that can make sure that they also know where you're going, especially young women who are starting in the dating world or going to festivals or doing things like that. Having a location shared is something that we have said from the beginning with our teenagers has to happen. I think a second thing, outside of the strength in numbers is things like, here's my little drink here. Don't, you made a good comment too of don't accept things from people, even if it's someone who you think, has been with you at school or whatever. People are so quick to be able to put stuff in drinks and food, especially with the younger generation, that it blows my mind how quickly someone can be drugged or incapacitated, whether it's taking a bite of something, a drink of something, or even topically absorption through your skin. And so even though I think as moms, we don't want to live in this state of worry, but being able to be in a state of educational empowerment is different. And so having those conversations and making sure my kids know them. I know sometimes I hear the little chime, we know, like after I've gone through. But guess what? My kids now who are adults and my son who's graduating high school this week, I now can just say, I need to know who you're going with, what time and when. We don't do curfews. So I would say that is something too. And I know that's a family decision, but instead of saying, you need to be home by midnight every night or 10 p.m. every night, I say, I need to know who you're going with, when, where, why, and if the plan changes, I need to be able to have a text from you. And from transition to transition, you need to tell me when you're leaving one place and you got to another place. As he's gotten older, now he's 18, it's more of he will just let me know as a courtesy. It's not that I'm trying to police him or, helicopter parent him, but it has now taught him that he will just automatically say, hey, I wanted to let you know I'm going to this person's house. And also, I think another big thing is having a code word or a code phrase with your kids or young people, or even, your spouse, partner, whatever that looks like. Where if you are ever in a situation where, let's say, friends are getting in the car and someone starts, using a substance, underage, or doing something that you're not comfortable with, that you can call mom and say, my throat is starting to hurt. Do you mind coming to pick me up? I've had that happen with my teenage daughters before, where they had gone with friends to walk around this little area, which I was fine with, and one of them lit up, pot. And in America, in the United States, that's a pretty controversial issue. But for adults, it's, one thing if it's legalized, but for these kids, it's not. And so they could be charged with criminal charges. And so my daughter just said, hey, you know what? I forgot I had a lot of homework. I've got to call my mom. And she had the code word. And I knew, to ask then, are you safe? Yes, but, and I was able to go get her because she was uncomfortable. So I think even if it's not something of, I feel like my life is being threatened, anything that's an uncomfortable situation, have that code word or those, and also with the caveat of, if you call me and tell me to come get you, you're not going to be in trouble. Like, unless the situation warrants further, consequence. But if you go to a party and there's drinking, I will come get you. And you will, those kind of things are really important.
We have a text message one with my eldest daughter. So even if she was with friends, she would text me, I love you, mom. And if she put 3 capital X's for kisses at the end, that meant you need to come and get me. Mm-hmm. So, and then I would make up an excuse and I'd come and get her. Because sometimes they're at a sleepover. They don't want their friends to know, that there's a situation. So she would be like, I love you, or, oh, we're having so much fun. 3 capital X's. And I would be like, listen, there's a problem at home. I have to come and get you right now. And I would come and pick her up so that she wouldn't. And that was the same rule. It didn't matter what had happened. If she had been drinking, which had only happened once, that I had to pick her up and she was visibly underage, had been drinking. I was like, we're not talking about that. You just call me, whatever the situation, I will pick you up. And like, that's the end of that. I agree. Yeah. So
we had the same situation with my mom. I think my mom must have done a lot of this stuff with me and I was unconscious of it, I'm going to say, because we were at a party underage. So in Canada, you have to be 19. I think we were 17 or 18 and we were drinking in it. Anyways, it got a little bad with someone's boyfriend and everyone was freaking out. Like, we all have to leave this party and we're all standing outside and everyone's like, oh, I can't call my mom. We can't go to my mom. We can't go to my mom. And I was like, I'll just call my mom. They're like, won't she be mad? And I was like, I don't know. Like, we're going to fit all 9 of you girls in her van. Like,
yes,
if I get in trouble later, I get in trouble later, because I just had that, like, I don't know what the right word is, but just confidence that my mom wasn't going to get me in trouble. I was in a little bit of trouble. She was like, Jessica, do you see how your friends are? You are not going to go to sleep tonight. You are going to sit up and watch all your friends and make sure they don't throw up in their sleep. And it was a good lesson for me because I was like, okay, like, yeah, these are the consequences. But I had that safety in, like, okay, well, we'll call my mom then. If none of you guys can call your mom, like, we'll call mine. I don't care. And I think that's super, super important for young girls, even old, like young women, but to be able to call that person.
Yeah.
Super important.
So Rachel, you had some other tips too about just moving around in general, like leaving shopping centers, coming home, different things if someone's at your door. So can you share some of those with us too? Because some of those tips are so amazing.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things I, really want to impress upon anyone who uses a rideshare service in America, we use a lot of Uber, Lyft, taxis, is not to ever tell the person who's driving the vehicle, especially if you're going to traveling like to a new place, that you don't know where you're at. Or if they say, "Are you from here?" You can always just say, "Oh, I'm a regular." Or yeah, if you don't want to say yes, this is where I live, you can say very familiar with the area. Or you can just say nothing. I think that comes back to the politeness thing. We don't have to give a response. But one thing that I found, which was really interesting, one of the times that I took my kids to New York, the Uber driver said, "So where are you guys from?" And my kids just started, telling them we're from this place. And I was like,
Life story.
Zip it, like zip it. Like, what are you talking about? And so that was really good for me though, about 4 or 5 years ago when that happened, because I realized even though they had been taught self-defense, safety, they don't need to be able to, telling a stranger this who's driving us. And I saw, several people when I made a video about that comment that they had been put in really scary situations where one of them was more of a money making thing. A mom had taken her kids to New York, and the driver said that she owed them $400 for a 10-minute trip. And she was this mom with young kids, and she had told him that she wasn't from there, and he wasn't letting her out of the car. And so, I mean, things like that are really important. But the second thing is always sharing a location of when you start a trip, even if it's somewhere where you live in this community, but you're taking an Uber because you're going to meet friends or whatever. Share those locations because you're allowed to share your route, and get on the phone. And whether you really make this call or you fake this call, saying to, "Hi, yes, dad," or "Hi, brother," or "Hi, husband. Yes, I can't wait. I'm 5 minutes away. I just shared my location with you. Oh, wow. Okay, great. The other guys are there too." Making them know that you have people waiting for you, even if you don't. Like, fake that call or make that call, but make sure that you are setting yourself up that if you are being dropped off at an apartment or a hotel, that people know those things, that someone's waiting for you, someone's expecting you. Another thing about just going in and out and traveling and transportation is making sure that if you have small kids, and I know I see this as a question all the time, like, people who have small children and they're worried about getting in and out of shopping centers or their kids being, snatched. Human trafficking is a real thing here in America, sadly. And one thing I always say is predators are looking for easy targets, or targets that are going to make it not as difficult to snatch. So for me, as I was going through those years with younger kids, I would get out of the car, lock the car, go grab a cart at the cart corral. I don't know how it is in Australia, but grab a cart because I could see the car still, and come back and put my kids in it. Or if they were in a stroller or a snapped car seat, I would leave them in those things to go inside with. It is a lot harder for a predator to grab a child out of something that they're buckled into than they're just holding your hand or just walking next to you. Even now, my teenagers, and they do it subconsciously, they'll just link arms with me as we walk in because they have known that they need to be close to me when we're going in and out of places. Another thing in terms of just having that awareness piece of going in and out that I would say is if, I have teenagers who sometimes didn't want to go inside the grocery store. So they're like, "Just leave me in the car if you're just running in for a moment." Obviously door locked, but if someone comes up to their window, and this happens a lot in the States, they'll knock on the window, they're asking for money, they're asking for a ride, they're asking, who knows, right? We don't know. Obviously don't roll down the window. But if you feel legitimately concerned, and I always lay your hand on the car horn, like make the largest sound you can. Like if you're wrong, fine. Like you can look like a crazy person and still be alive. But if you're right, you will have caused a distraction, and predators don't want attention. They don't want distractions. And so even if this is just someone who's unhoused coming up asking for money for food, if you're uncomfortable about it, if you do that, they're going to leave. They're not going to stay. And so the point is not to be rude or hateful, but the point is to feel safe and protected. And I think those are a few small things I can think through on the front end, but there are so many other things that we can do as well during those connection points. One last one I'll share is if you order food, and again, in the States, we have things called DoorDash, Grubhub. I don't know if that's a thing internationally. But I always make sure that in the notes section for the driver, I say, leave at the door for, and I put in a crazy name like Brutus or, Frank or somebody that sounds like, okay, I don't want to mess with this person. And I make sure that they've left before I open that door. And I don't open the door if somebody rings the doorbell at home and I'm not expecting someone, and I have a Ring camera. And so it's important for me that there's no point in me answering the door if I don't know or am expecting somebody. Anyone who knows me will call me and tell me that they're on their way over.
I think that's a really good one. I've been home before with my 2 young kids and someone's rang the doorbell. And unfortunately, how our house is set up, they can see quite far in. And my kids both just booked it to the door. Woo, someone's here. Exciting. Doorbell rang. And I was like, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Like, I'm not expecting anyone. We never have anyone ring the door. Anyways, it was nothing. Someone was asking for donations and stuff, but I did sit them down after and I said, if the doorbell rings, we don't run to the door, because I was uncomfortable opening that door. And I was probably a bit rude to that person asking for donations, because I was like, sorry, like, I think I was so stressed and caught up in the moment and what it could be. I was just like, sorry, like, dinner time, busy with kids, gotta go. Thanks, goodbye. Send me an email, get a hold of me some other way.
I think you should be okay though, just not answering that. Like, I will go to the door is still closed, and we have so we have security doors, obviously. And in our house, it's not required, but in Australia, they're like a mesh, right, for mosquitoes. Ours are steel. So you couldn't even cut through them with a knife. And even though that is closed and my door is closed, I will not open the front door. And so they'll be talking to me on the other side, and I'll just be like, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And I'm okay. Just literally, I will not open the door, even though there's a screen door in between there. We also always have all our screen doors locked. So even in summer and our doors are, our actual doors are open, all the screen doors always have to be locked, even if we're home. That's like a rule in my house. Same thing with car doors. My car doors, I get in the car, I lock the car, and my windows are always rolled up. Never drive with my windows down. Like, this is just like basic stuff that I grew up with. Or if I come home and there's a car behind me, I will not pull into my driveway. And like, my family have thought I was nuts over the years, but now I see my elder daughter does it too. So we won't pull into the driveway, because then they can block you in. And so a lot of the hijackings in South Africa happen at your gate, where you would get out and open the gate, or you would stop in your driveway to open your garage door or whatever, and then they pull in behind you and you can't get out. So you had some great ones about, so here in Australia, obviously, we're not allowed firearms. We're not allowed to walk around with anything like that. But you had some great tips, about the AirTag situation, which can be a positive, but can also be a negative. And some kind of security stuff that you can have at your front doors and things in your own house.
Yes. So one thing that, I know a lot of countries ban firearms, and a lot of people, even in the States, really have mixed feelings about them. And that's fine, and I think for me, I tend to be of the non-firearm, because I don't want to have that around my children. Not that that's a poor choice if someone chooses to make it. But one thing that anyone can get is wasp spray. So like wasp and hornet spray. And a lot of people say pepper spray. Pepper spray is great. If you have pepper spray, that's fantastic. But wasp and hornet spray, I have a lot of friends and family that are in law enforcement. And they told me that wasp spray is more of a deterrent than any other kind of spray that you can get. And so if you keep those by your doors, if you keep it in your vehicle, make sure the heat element, you don't want it to get too hot or too cold with an aerosol spray can. But that is something that could save your life. And I think one thing I didn't mention earlier is, if you are in a situation where you legitimately are having to fight, someone off or have to do things of that nature. Your goal is to be able to just get away. So I always see these funny comments of people that are like, I would beat them up, or I would, do that. I'm like, okay, really though, you're just looking for that window of creating a loud enough, more, getting DNA underneath your fingernails. And you should tell children that. It's scary to think of that, but spitting, like leaving your own DNA, is those things are important to let people know. But I think having things like pepper spray is great. An alarm is really good because it creates a distraction. Wasp spray is fantastic. And then one thing too, if you are ever in a situation where you are having to physically get away from someone, there are things that women and children can do no matter what size they are that could really help. And so one of the things I talked about earlier about showing a couple self-defense things, and I'll explain this too for listeners, is if you put your hand in a thumb to forefinger type thing, like if you were thinking about doing like a sock puppet with your hands, you're trying to create a hard impact against someone. And so 3 very vulnerable areas are your eyes and your neck and your nose. And so those are 3 things that if someone were to grab you and you have the thought where you can just mentally think, get my hands in this, pecking type move where you peck someone's eye like that, it's going to give you a moment. One other thing, if you are, and I'm sorry this sounds so grim to just talk about it this way, but I think these are important tips. If you are ever grabbed from behind, whether it's around the neck, around the arms, it's instinctual for us to want to pull that away from us. But if you can take a moment to just quickly turn your brain into grabbing your little pinching of this underarm area, underarm between your elbow and your shoulder, that is a very tender area on people. And if you can pinch, no matter if you're a child doing this, a woman doing this, right there on an attacker, it typically will throw them off for a second. And you'll be able to, continue to fight your way through it. Pinching, hitting the neck, hitting the eyes and the ears are going to be your best option. And also screaming, making a scene. It's hard sometimes when that fight or flight or freeze kicks in. But the reason we talk about this is because if we can start talking about it, it becomes a core memory that then if that ever were to happen, and we hope to God it won't, that those are the memories you think of in those chaotic crisis memories. And that's why it's important to educate children and women about these things.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, this is causing a little bit of stress in my body at the moment, talking about these things, and lots of things are going through my head, but that's exactly what I was just thinking. I was like, but I guess the more I think about this, you're right. At the beginning, it's very stressful and a hard conversation, but I do maybe not right this second yet. I need to process it a little bit more, but I feel like I could get more empowered by like, this is what I can do, because I think we've all been in that in a situation where, we have frozen and you're like, oh God, I didn't say anything. I didn't do anything, because you're in that freeze state. So the more we can think about it, the more empowering it can get. But it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to hear you guys talk about this stuff. I'm not going to lie. I think I've been very neglectful in the past with my safety, with walking into the supermarket with 2 kids in my hand and also on my phone and stuff like that. And it's really made me stop and think about some of this stuff.
We've generally been in a safe environment here though, Jess.
Like
here where we are has been up until now pretty safe. It's the country where people, don't lock their doors and, all that kind of thing. But we're definitely moving out of that now.
I hear a lot of things on the radio and stuff, and at first it was like, how does that stuff even happen here? And then you do hear more and more of it, and you're like, wow, these are getting closer to home.
Yeah. Well, and you shouldn't necessarily feel bad for the past. The fact is we do better when we know better, right? And so that's why it's important to always remain a lifelong learner and teachable, because new things happen and we're constantly having to adjust and evolve our way of thinking. And we don't want to, have obsessive thoughts or worry over these things, but it is important in a compartmentalized way to have the conversations and to have the social awareness. And one thing I will jump on and just say too is I see a lot of comments from people who feel like they can't make great eye contact, or they don't feel like they have the social awareness. Maybe they're neurodivergent, maybe, it's not something culturally that they were raised doing. But I will say is, I'm neurodivergent, and I will say that these things, you just have to practice them. And we're not talking about perfection. We're just talking about the fact that having that education of, even if someone is not great at eye contact, doing it, just going in and out and just practicing that can really help build some more confidence and skills. One thing I do in my day-to-day job is I work with women's empowerment, getting women into the workforce. And we talk a lot about confidence and how first impressions work. And this really just coincides with safety and self-defense, because if a woman is distracted, or they're hunched over, or they're sad, or and we're going to have those emotions, but the going in and out of places specifically, or when you're in a public facing area, setting up tall, being wide, feeling like, and I don't care if you're 4 foot tall or 6 foot tall, it's going to make you less of a target, because you're going to look like someone who is going to fight. Like, if you approach me, I'm going to yell, I'm going to say something, I'm going to fight back. Predators are looking for people who are not paying attention, maybe you're kind of slumped over. That, sadly, that is what we've seen time and time again.
Yeah, very true. In your opinion, is there anything we can do, like as a society or a community or a workplace, to create a safer environment?
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that I think that need to be talked about in workplaces, especially, is consent. And I know that that should be a pretty common sense conversation, but a lot of times it's not. And also, it is to, Yvette's point of strength in numbers. So if you are working in an environment with both men and women or non-binary, and there are people who have to open or close businesses, is making sure that they aren't having to make those transitions alone. Like, you always have more than one person in a workforce setting, and that having security systems, having closed caption TV, things like that will help in some ways. But also, just from a legality, like institutional change that we need to make, I think one of the biggest things that, I feel like in America anyway, is around school gun violence. So we see a lot of, the crimes and predator situation around that here. But also, I think it's important that we are constantly keeping the message out in front of people. So as hard as it is, I mean, we have people every day that are getting trafficked or kidnapped, that it becomes almost a desensitized situation or topic here. And we can't let that happen, like, because we're not changing the narrative. If it's just like, oh, it happened again, oh, another thing, we have to stand up and make a difference in our communities and say, no, we're not going to do that. Another thing I think that companies could do that would really help, especially for these young moms, is have more parking dedicated in the front to parents with children. And so that those parking spaces are reserved for parents with small children, and they are well lit. They are in a position where, you're not having to walk, a tenth of a mile, quarter mile to get up to the front of the store. And it allows just that opportunity to make an easier access. So I think those are just some real quick ways that people can start, instituting change. And change needs to happen in a lot bigger ways, but we can start small. And I think those are things that everybody could probably agree with doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of business owners just don't think about those things, especially, sadly, especially if they're men who have never been in a situation where they have been concerned about their, safety and security. They just, well, my husband's done it. We have a chiropractic clinic. He's just packed up and left. Right. And then our reception staff have been there, and because he's 6'5", like, he's never felt that, I think, that feeling constantly. And we have had people come and knock on our door and trying to get in. And so it happens everywhere. Now, Rachel, you use your social media platforms a lot to share this sort of message and a lot of others. If people are looking for you or would like to connect with you, would like to follow you, where do they find you?
So I'm on TikTok. That is where I can be found. My account is at Rachel the Dreamer. I started this a couple years back before I knew that this was really where I was going to dedicate most of my time. And so you can find me there. And I try to post at least 5 to 7 times a week with different tips, different self-defense. And I have a couple different series that are specific for this. It's all free to come and watch. And one reason that I picked TikTok especially is because I was on the platform for about a year. And it's just a mindless thing, right? Like you watch a lot of funny videos or weird videos. And I started seeing all these young people on the platform. And I thought, why can't I use this for good? Like these are things that people need to know. And they can, like Jessica said, be uncomfortable. And they are. But I'm not seeing them being educated outside of anywhere. And this is where they're coming for their media consumption. So I'm hoping that by having it on TikTok, it will engage a new audience of young people and people of all ages to really pay attention and think about some things that maybe they hadn't in the past. So, but yeah, TikTok.
TikTok is where you can find her. And I mean, that's the thing, Rachel, really, like just one of those videos that you make one of those weeks could make a massive difference in someone's life, literally, of what can happen to them and what cannot. So I think, yeah, I was never a fan of TikTok. I love it now because I follow the things that I know interest me, and I find really cool people for us to bring on here to talk with, like Rachel, and hopefully teach you a few things. So I hope you guys have learnt 1 or 2 things today that's going to help you. I hope you're able to share those with your loved ones and your children around you. And as usual, wherever you are in the world, we hope you are having an absolutely incredible day, and we can't wait to chat to you again next time on The Transformation Project. Thank you for listening in to this episode of The Transformation Project. The Transformation Project is not just a podcast, we're also a community. We're a collective of like-minded people all around the world seeking to live their best life and raise each other up. We're looking to support you, set goals, get healthier, connect with yourself and others at a deeper level, and better understand yourself and the world around you. We're always looking to link arms with like-minded people, wanting to create more out of life. You can connect with us via our website, which is www.thetransformationproject.net.au. Email us at support@thetransformationproject.net.au. Or simply listen in to one of our podcast episodes, which can be found on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can even watch some of our episodes on our YouTube channel, simply called The Transformation Project. Please like and subscribe to make sure you hear all the incredible shows and guests we have lined up. If you have any feedback or any comment, we would love to hear those, as well as any ideas or guests that you think we should be interviewing in future. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Transformation Project.